Maybe not, because I think he had one big game last year, at least fantasy related, but he had like 36 carries or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
he's going to be the short yardage back, so he might sneak in for a couple of touchdowns, and if he does, he'll be a great play, but, you don't want to have your full lineup held hostage hoping some guy like that scores 2 touchdowns.
Exactly. And speaking of that, let's go ahead and just touch on a little DFS knowledge here. Can you explain what chasing points means to some of our newer DFS players?
You mean chasing value?
Chasing value, yeah, I'm sorry, chasing value.
Okay, on FanDuel it sets up pretty nicely. You have a $60,000 salary cap. Okay, and in order to pretty much guarantee you winning your cash games, which are your 50-50s, your head-to-heads, and your double-ups, 120 points will pretty much guarantee you hitting cashing. So you need to score 2 fantasy points for every $1,000 of salary. So if a player, let's say a player's salary is $6,000, he needs to score 12 points to hit value, and that's what we mean by that.
Exactly.
In tournament play, you're going to need a whole lot more points if you want to get into big money. And I'm not talking about minimum cashing. I'm talking about on the first page, maybe winning the whole thing. You're going to need about 180 points. So that's 3 times the 60,000. So when you talk about cash game value, you're talking about a player basically doubling his salary in points. In a tournament, you're talking about a player tripling his salary in points, which is pretty hard to do.
Yeah, exactly, especially when you get to some of those top-tier guys. But it's kind of a good way to look at it when you're looking at salaries and, recent games and what they're averaging, because you can kind of get an idea of what to expect from a player and kind of gauge where you're at, on Sunday when you have Monday guys going, if you're going to be within that, that top range, like you said, in the GPP, or if you're going to be able to cash in some of your cash games. So, yeah, definitely a nice way to gauge that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And DraftKings is sort of, because their pricing system is different, you're basically looking at 3 times for cash and 4 for tournaments there. Maybe a little less than 3 for cash, but 2.5 for cash and about 4 for tournaments there.
Okay, all right. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on with the running backs? You want to move on to the wide receivers?
I think we can move on to wide receivers.
All right.
There's not a whole lot of running backs on my radar, so my lineups are pretty simple. I've got 4 running backs in all my lineups.
Gotcha. All right, so of course in the top tier we got Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, we got ODB, we got D. Thomas in Denver, and Dez Bryant. I guess we can put Calvin Johnson in that top tier there. Anybody up in that top range that we're looking at?
I like a lot of them, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you on that.
I think wide receiver is one of those positions, and if you can't afford it in your lineup, it's a good thing to pay up for. Because if you look at targets, and that target is the number of times a quarterback throws to a receiver, those top receivers have the confidence of their quarterback, so the quarterbacks throw to them a lot. And obviously a wide receiver is 100% dependent on their quarterback to get the points. They don't get thrown the ball, they're not going to get any points. So the safest options are always your top guys. And with that said, I think all the top 3 of them are all good plays. Antonio Brown, if he was on a Sunday, would be a top play. Being that he's playing on Thursday, is not a top play for me. My 2 favorite plays of the day are Julio Jones and Odell Beckham. And they're both in almost the exact same situation. They're in high over-under games against bad defenses with teams expected to lose. So they're going to be getting thrown to the whole game. There are not a lot of other options on the team. Victor Cruz is not expected to play against Dallas. So Odell Beckham is the number 1. In Atlanta, Julio Jones is head and shoulders the number 1. Roddy White has been battling injury, and there really is nobody else to throw to on that team. And then you look to see if they've done it before. Julio Jones last season in back-to-back games scored 29.9 and 37.4 fantasy points, while Odell Beckham scored in consecutive games. I mean, it's mind-boggling. 25.4, 36.3, 30.8, and 30.5, which is well more than 3 times.
Yeah, Odell Beckham just kind of came out of nowhere and just took over. I think I read somewhere in season-long leagues, he was the most owned in all championship games. He was the most owned player because he just kind of came out of nowhere and just won everybody championships. I know I played in 2 leagues that had one player in common, one league owner in common, and he had Odell Beckham in both of on his teams, and he won both leagues.
I mean, and don't forget that Dallas's top cornerback, Orlando Scandrick, is gone for the year.
Yeah, exactly. So ODB definitely on the radar there. So with Des Bryant, any interest in Des Bryant in that same game? I know he's been battling injuries all preseason, but I think today he was a full participant. Is there any interest in Des Bryant?
Not really. I think Dallas is going to be able to effectively run the ball with who knows who, but they'll be effectively able to run the ball, and they're expected to win. I think Des could have a good game, but I don't think he's in as good a position as the other two.
Good deal. All right, now moving down into this mid-range, and I will tell you that, at least for me, there's not a lot that I really like in this mid-range. You might be different. There's a couple injuries to be worried about, but we're looking at guys like Randall Cobb, Alshon Jeffries, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins is in there, Keenan Allen, T.Y. Hilton. Are any of these guys on your fantasy radar?
There's a couple guys who I'm going to be playing in light exposure to in tournament games. One is Keenan Allen. He's having an outstanding preseason. He had a great rookie season, fell off a little bit last year, but he's in one of those positions. He's a clear number one. The injury to Antonio Gates helps him a lot. The rest of the receiving core there is uninspiring, and so is the running game. So I think San Diego is going to have to throw a lot. So Keenan Allen's in a real good position against the Detroit team that was pretty good last year against the run, not so great against the pass, and they've lost a couple key pieces on the defense, so he's one to look out for. And another guy's a little cheaper at $7,400 on FanDuel is Brandon Cooks from New Orleans. Again, he's another guy that's a clear number one over there. They lost Kenny Stills. They lost their tight end. Colston is a year older, and there's not a whole lot else to throw to there. But he's going to crack a couple of my tournament lineups as well.
Yeah, I actually like Brandon Cooks as well. I actually got to a conversation with somebody claiming that Arizona's defense was going to shut him down, but I think the way the Saints sort of run their offense, I think they're going to manufacture touches for Brandon Cooks, a lot of short bubble screens, those kind of things. And I just think if you saw him in preseason on that long play, and I forget who they played, but he just blew past them. It was unbelievable some of the speed that he has. So he definitely is healed up from that injury he had last year.
He was having a pretty decent rookie year as the season went along until he got hurt too.
Right. Yeah, I agree. He was definitely there, and that was even with Stills and Jimmy Graham on the team. So definitely looking at Cooks. I have him high in season long as well. Okay, moving down to some of these third tier guys, and see if I can point out some of these interesting ones. Jordan Matthews, Jarvis Landry. We got Andre Johnson, of course, now with the Colts. Steve Smith with Baltimore. There's not really another receiver in Baltimore other than Steve Smith. Anybody in this range that sort of is going to be into any of your lineups?
Yeah, I think Jordan Matthews is an outstanding player at 6,800. Again, he'll be playing in the highest over-under game, and he's the de facto number one receiver in Philadelphia with Macklin going on to Kansas City. He had some big games last year. He scored 20.5 fantasy points against the Giants, even with Macklin there. Now he's the guy, and again, he's going against that terrible Atlanta pass defense. 6,800, I think he might be value-wise the best play at wide receiver.
Yep, I agree on that one. I actually wrote an article featuring Jordan Matthews and said just that. He's the number one receiver in a high-powered offense. And he's 6,800. You can't beat that value. You definitely need to have him in your lineups.
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody else in there, or anybody you're avoiding altogether?
I think anybody there could have a decent game, especially Steve Smith. At his age, he tends to play pretty well at the beginning of the year and then fall off as the year goes along. There's not a lot else to throw to in Baltimore, so I think Steve Smith is a decent play. Baltimore's, again, in a high over-under game. So
Yeah, I was thinking Steve Smith too, because you're right. I mean, there's just not anything else there. I actually expect Justin Forsett to probably be the second leading receiver on that team with Trestman there. He loves to throw to his running backs. I don't really see Perriman or Kamar Aiken or any of those guys really stepping up to take over that sort of number 2 role as a receiver.
Right.
Any punt guys in here? Any guys that are like near min value that we're looking at to have big games here?
Yeah, there's a couple guys. One of the highest owned players is going to be Devontae Adams. He's priced at $5,500 on FanDuel, and with the injury to Jordy Nelson, he's going to be the starting wide receiver in a high-powered offense. I just think he's going to be so highly owned. He's going to be in a couple of my lineups, but he's got to prove it to me a little bit. He can have some great games. He scored 21.2 points against Dallas last year, which was outstanding. And then in other games, he tended to disappear a little bit. So he's going to have to be one of those guys to show me. Of course, this price tag's going to kick up next week as well, but
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think FanDuel, I don't know how often they've done this before. You played longer than I have, but they released their prices pretty early in the off season, and I think there's a lot of value to be had in week 1 because of injuries. That I think week 2 we're not going to see the same type of value. I don't believe. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, week 1 the score should be really high because of all the value out there. It's going to tighten up a lot in week 2.
Yeah, I agree, definitely.
If you want to completely punt, I think Eddie Royal is a good option at $5,000. With the injury to Kevin White, he's going to be starting opposite Alshon Jeffrey, who's not going to be 100%. The Bears are going to have to throw a lot to keep up with Green Bay, and Royal is one of those guys. He's not a big guy, so he shouldn't be a good target in the red zone, but he has a nose for the end zone, and at $5,000, he doesn't have to do a lot to hit that.
Yeah, exactly, and it allows you to get some of the more studs in your lineup as well. I think Eddie Royal is definitely a good call. All right, let's go ahead and move into the tight end positions here. Of course, you got Rob Gronkowski basically in a league of his own, priced like a top-end wide receiver.
Yeah, he's way too expensive.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's interesting in the sense that I don't think Patriots have a lot to throw to, because I believe Julian Edelman, he's coming back, but he's been injured. LaFell's not going to play. But
right.
At 8,100, I don't know if I can, justify putting him in my lineups. And then, of course,
the whole thing about Thursday too with him too.
Yeah, exactly. And he's going to be very highly owned because of that fact, I imagine. So sort of the tier under Rob Gronkowski, we're looking at guys like Jimmy Graham, of course Martellus Bennett, Travis Kelce, and Greg Olsen is sort of like the 4 tight ends that are in that sort of second tier. Any guys in that range you like?
I like Olsen a lot. He's the number 1 option in Carolina. It's not even close. He was targeted 122 times last season. And with the injury to Kelvin Benjamin, he was targeted 146 times. He's by far the best option, and he's the only tight end that can say he's the number 1 receiving option on the team. Even Gronkowski can't say that because Edelman was targeted more times than he was. He's going against a Jaguars team that was rated 22nd in the league last year covering tight ends. I think he's head and shoulders my favorite player.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I believe I have Greg Olsen in nearly every lineup. There's just not any other tight ends there that I like. I'm not a big fan. I think Jimmy Graham's going to have a good NFL season. I don't know how well his fantasy season is going to be. I see him being strictly a red zone target. I don't think he's going to get near as many targets as he did, obviously, with the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah. And the Rams have a good defense, too. And we don't know how the Seahawks are going to use it, so I'm going to wait and see on them.
Exactly. And then tight ends sort of fall off a cliff as you move down into the next tier here. We got, Jason Witten. We got Ladarius Green, Heath Miller, Jordan Cameron, Owen Daniels. Any of the guys in this range that you like?
Not really, to be honest with you. Ladarius Green is an athletic